Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, the third Tuesday of the month, and it is the homeowner webinar series. We've got maybe one more minute left. Maybe in the chat for right now, just put where you're from, and we'll see where we've got everybody from. Open my chat here. Oh, we've got Tampa. And it's Julia. In Naples. I hope you guys are okay. I know you guys got hit pretty hard. So I'm glad to see some people from all these areas, Collier and Orlando. Gosh, it's so nice to see everybody after all these storms this last couple months. I want it, Sarah. Good morning, Sarah. I love to see all the new people and the people I know come back. So welcome to all of you who, this is not your first webinar. I appreciate you coming back. So it's 11 o'clock. Let's get started. Hold on one second. Okay. Welcome to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program's Homeowner Webinar Series, a series that's given every third Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. My name is Jen Marvin, and I'm the Florida Friendly for Home Landscape Statewide Coordinator. It's a long title. Today we have Deirdre Irwin from the St. Johns River Water Management District to give you an overview on residential irrigation. So this will be a good one. First, let me get us started by saying that your microphones are muted. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box instead of the chat box. I'm going to shut the chat box down in a few minutes. It's just easier for us when we have really solid questions. We don't have to scroll back through the chat. Let's see. Please stick around until after the webinar to take our survey. It helps me give you the kind of programming that you like and lets us know how we're doing. And speaking of programming, next year will be our 5th year presenting the Homeowner Webinar Series. And I'm pre-planning for next year's already. If you have a topic that you'd like us to present or a subject or an issue you'd like us to address, please write it on your survey response. There should be a little note section at the end. And I really do read them and I will review them for suggestions. I was just saying it's been 48 webinars in 4 years. So it's really hard to find a new topic or to get to, what else you all would like to hear. So our next webinar will be exciting. It's on November 19th at 11 a.m. This is our special webinar, Ask an Expert. So what I've done is I've invited speakers back to address some of the questions you've submitted through this year. We'll have 2 of our previous presenters. One is Brooke Moffis, and she'll be discussing or answering questions about turf alternatives and ground covers. We'll have Amanda Merrick and Mark Bailey, who will take your questions about foodscaping. And I've also invited Michelle Atkinson, who's one of her specialties is pond health. So, we haven't had that topic yet, I don't believe, in this webinar series. So if you have questions, maybe about your HOA ponds or water bodies in general, she's one of the people to ask for sure. So I'd like to give the panel some of your questions beforehand. If you would like to send me an email with the topic November webinar question in it, I can collect those and then give them an idea of the topic subjects that you'd like to hear about, as well as take your live questions. So let me introduce our speaker. Deirdre Irwin is a great friend of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. She is the Florida Water Star coordinator for St. Johns River Water Management District. She's got 32 years of experience at the district and has worked with the district's surface water regulatory programs, water resource education programs, and certification program development and implementation. Her work as a Florida Water Star coordinator involves administering the program and overseeing training and outreach for the program. Deirdre is on the board of the Florida Green Building Coalition, and she serves on the Florida Friendly program, UF-IFAS Duval Commercial Horticulture Program. Deirdre also serves on the Technical Advisory Committee for the WERS certification program. Deirdre, thank you so much for joining us today, and you can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Jen. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. And first off, I want to say I'm really sorry for any of you who experienced damage or flooding or any other trauma through the last few weeks of hurricanes that came through the state. In some ways, when I was preparing this PowerPoint, I couldn't help but think about people who wished they could go about their irrigation controller and they're instead dealing with totally flooded landscapes. So bear with me as I'm going to cover a topic and assume normal circumstances, even though I know many of you are not dealing with that right now. So I noticed that a lot of you are from areas other than the St. John's River Water Management District, but what I'm going to share is pretty much the same for all the districts. There's minor changes between our rules, but for the most part, our mission statements and our core missions are the same. So don't worry about, thinking that this might not be relevant. I always like to include this picture with our mission statement because it is becoming an increasing balancing act to achieve our mission whilst Florida continues to grow at quite a pace. So the role of the district, our mission statement, is to protect our natural resources and support Florida's growth by ensuring the sustainable use of Florida's water for the benefit of the people of the district. So basically, we're all jugglers who are figuring out, helping our local governments and our partners figure out where to find the water, how to pay for new sources of water, and also protect our natural sources of water above the ground, beneath the ground. So our core missions at the district, I'm just moving those pictures away, I was distracted, is water supply, which I'll get into more detail in a few minutes. But that's where we work with local governments, water management districts, DEP, to address regional and local water supply issues. Water quality, we work to address water quality issues through a variety of activities, including our cost share program with local governments, aquatic system restoration and protection, our permitting programs, and our land acquisition. Our natural systems part of our core mission is how we steward natural lands, both lands that we own, and that would be about over 400,000 acres of land, and some additional land, over 300,000 acres, that we manage through partnerships with a number of other agencies. So protecting those natural areas is a very important part of our mission. One that maybe should have been discussed first is flood protection. You probably all noticed we're either in a drought or a flood, and it can flip from one to the other really quickly. So flood protection is a very important mission of the district, and it makes sure that both structural and non-structural, we use structural and non-structural techniques to provide flood protection. And we have some levees, water control structures that we maintain on certain water bodies. And then also we have regulatory methods to control areas to reduce flooding. So that's right now, it's a very busy area of our mission statement. We've got a lot of folks out making sure that all of our flood control systems are operable and functioning correctly to minimize the impacts of flooding from these storms. So this can be a confusing story to tell. And as more and more people have moved to the state of Florida from other parts of the country, especially areas like California, New Mexico, the Southwest, they arrive in Florida and see lakes and springs and lots of rainfall. So it appears that we have abundant supply. However, the water that is traditionally available for us to use in our homes is becoming an increasingly impaired source. But it's a good news, bad news story, because we do have over 50 inches of rainfall. This year is going to be higher for sure. In the St. John's district, we have over 7,000 lakes, 50,000 miles of streams and rivers, And Florida has the largest concentration of springs in the world. And those springs are obviously connected to our Floridan aquifer. It's one of the most prolific aquifer systems in the world. It has been our traditional source and continues to be of water supply for both residential, industrial, commercial, and institutional water uses across the state. That source, though, is in fact becoming impaired as more and more people move into the state. And I'm getting to irrigation, but it's important to understand that this part of the story and why residential irrigation is almost our number one target area. So I mentioned I get back to water supply planning. I think this is kind of cool that our Florida legislature included this decades ago, that when it's determined that existing sources of water are not adequate to supply water for existing and future reasonable beneficial uses, not wasteful uses, and to sustain water resources related to natural systems, a water supply plan must be developed. So written into the Florida statutes is this requirement when we start to see impacts on natural systems like lakes, rivers, springs, the water management district of that area must develop a plan. Our entire district is now under regional water supply planning. It is an entire department at the district. It wasn't when I first started because we weren't seeing these impairments. But now, as we continue to measure the impact on natural systems, we know we need to be very strategic in how we plan for water use. So we have 3 regions in the St. John's district. I didn't cover the other districts, but you can go on their websites and see where their regional water supply planning regions are. We have the North Florida one, which is a partnership with Swanee River Water Management District and DEP. We have the CFWI, Central Florida Water Initiative, and that includes South Florida Water Management District and SwiftMud, our Southwest Water Management District. So there we have 3 districts share this region of impairment and work on the plan together with oversight from DEP. And in between those 2 regions is what we call CSEC. It's Central Springs East Coast Region. And I put the names of the staff who manage those water supply plans, pulling together all that information. So these plans are developed upon discovery of impairment, and then every 5 years they must be updated. And then once they are updated, the local comprehensive plans in each county must reflect the existence of the regional water supply plans, and we are required to come up with projects to help address that long-term planning. So this is a really important part of what the district does. So let's take a look at how we're using water and who's using the water. This is hot off the press. We have a nice story map on our website with the entire report. This is just one graphic. Every year we produce a water use report based on all of the data that comes into us and how much water is being used. So for 2023, the report just got released, and for the second year in a row, over 1,000 million gallons per day is being used. It's the first time we've hit that threshold. 60% of that water use is public water supply, meaning utility water that's delivered to customers, both public and private. The segment for agriculture, that green segment, has gotten smaller again, a combination of reduced acreage used for irrigation or for agriculture and more efficient strategies being employed in agriculture has reduced that. It seems like just a few years ago where agriculture and public supply were equal size in this pie chart. The others are smaller groups, commercial, industrial, landscape recreation, that would be like golf courses and parks, and then power generation. The water is recycled in that, but there is some loss. So those are the main categories of water use in the state. And you can see the number 1 area is public water supply, and that in many cases is our number 1 target for conservation. So the district considers, and DEP considers, water conservation to be the most important action we can take to sustain our current water supply and perhaps delay development of alternative sources. The reality is we are working with our local governments to develop alternative sources of water. And water providers are going to be looking for more and more ways that they can save water. We're employing many technological components as well as traditional outreach and homeowner education like this webinar in order to ramp up and have quantifiable conservation in all of our water supply planning regions. So let's drill down a little bit and take a look at who's using the water and how we use water in our homes. So when we look at residential water use, we know at least 50% of that water use, if the home has an automatic irrigation system, is used outdoors. So for the homes that do not have irrigation systems, it's significantly less. It's mainly indoor water use. Of the homes, based on information from the UF H2O SAVE program over the last couple of years, in looking at millions of homes, data from water use throughout the entire state, we know that homes that have reclaimed water are using significantly more, sometimes up to 75%. And there's different reasons for that, but part of it is reclaimed water is not restricted in any way. It's exempt from the irrigation restrictions. And there's good reason for that. If a local government is producing reclaimed, they can only store so much of it. It's a disposal method. So they have to eliminate it. And we'll talk more about reclaimed water shortly. It's important not to ignore the indoor water uses. We've seen tremendous improvements in water savings inside the home. Clothes washers and dishwashers have become increasingly efficient, and the Department of Energy Star program actually just issued another specification. They're working to reduce water use even further in clothes washers and dishwashers. A clothes washer you buy today and put in your home uses approximately 50% less water than 10 years ago. So it's really significant what's been achieved. Toilets are becoming more efficient, faucets and even showers. The EPA WaterSense program has made those very acceptable. So to confirm what we know about irrigation water use and the increase of that use, this table was sourced by UF from Alachua, Gainesville, Florida. For many years, they tracked, as building permits came in, who was and who was not putting in an irrigation system, an automatic irrigation system. You can see on this table, around 1990, we started seeing an increase in the percentage of new homes that had irrigation systems. So much so by 2020, they stopped gathering data because pretty much every new home coming in had an irrigation system. Look at the corresponding water use. It's significant. So the increase in water use in residential homes is definitely due to the commonplace existence of an automatic irrigation system when you build a new home. And you'd be surprised actually how few people fully understand that. I presented a couple of years ago for a county commission in North Florida, and the city commission. I'm mistaken, the county commission. The commissioners were shocked to hear that every home being built had an in-ground irrigation system, and that was contributing to some of their water resource issues. So like everything else in life, so much of this comes down to money. We've had this access to this prolific source of very cheap, clean water, meaning the current water supply, which is the Floridan aquifer. And now we are required to find these other sources so we can protect the natural systems. The most common ones, and I'll speak more to this in a moment, is reclaimed water or reused water is another term, treated wastewater used outside the home. Lower Floridan aquifer. We are fortunate in St. John's District in Central Florida to have tested the water underneath the Floridan aquifer, is what we call the Lower Floridan aquifer, and it is has proven to be a very good source of clean water. So that is becoming a viable option for local governments who don't have access to, for instance, surface water. It's cheaper to treat and get out to the homes through pumping. Brackish groundwater, seawater, surface water are all considerably more expensive. And this is recent data gathered by primarily, a lot of it came from JEA in South Florida Water Management District, recent studies of the cost to develop these water sources. But look back over here on the left, and you can see that conservation is, if you consider conservation to be an alternative source, it's still pretty cheap, same cost as current water supply. That's based on the cost to develop a program, hire staff, develop rebates, and implement a program. It's not free to do water conservation. There are actual costs, and that's what these numbers are based on. So this tells us in a region where there's impairment, that water conservation is a very viable and important contribution to lower the demand of water. Now, I mentioned reclaimed or alternative sources. The number one alternative source in Florida is treated wastewater, or reuse or reclaimed water are the most common terms. Florida actually leads the nation in the production of reclaimed water. Florida is still only taking advantage of a fraction of the potential reuse. So in 2023, approximately 61% of all the wastewater treatment flows in the St. John's District were reused for beneficial purposes. So that is this big piece of the pie chart here, not including the green or purple. All of this water is beneficially reused for public water supply, golf courses, other direct reuse specific purposes, and then in some cases groundwater recharge. They treat it and inject it back down into the aquifer. So, but there's still potential for a lot more savings in the 40% range, and those sources continue to be developed in Florida to further expand reclaimed water. The important thing to be aware of also, in 2021, Senate Bill 64 passed and became law. That requires domestic wastewater facilities to submit to DEP by later that year a plan for how they were going to eliminate any discharge of non-beneficial surface water discharge, is what they call it. So that's really significant. It's kind of a win for water conservation. So on one hand, because of water quality concerns, folks had to stop producing or dispersing this treated wastewater, and we need it for our water conservation programming. So that's good news. I do want to point out, when reuse is used for irrigation, which is the primary use of this water, we need to be very careful how it's used. Nutrients that can run straight into your stormwater pond from this water. So reclaimed water, even though it's highly treated, tends to have higher levels of nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen. So when those chemicals or those components of the reused water enter a water body, that is definitely a concern and can cause algae blooms, etc. So you almost need to be more careful with how you irrigate using reclaimed. Overspray can exacerbate nutrient runoff into ponds, and it's important to maybe consider fertilizer-free buffer areas adjacent to a pond and a very carefully designed irrigation system to protect. In many cases, when you have reclaimed, you don't need to use fertilizer. Now, that's a very broad statement. I'm not saying everyone who is reclaimed shouldn't use any fertilizer, but it's worth exploring the quality of the reclaimed water in your home to determine if you need to be adding more nutrients directly to the landscape. So let's dive into the nitty-gritty details of irrigation. I like to divide it into these 4 main topics. So efficient irrigation must contain each of these things: a good design and installation, correct scheduling, frequent maintenance and repairs, and then upgrading the system. The reality is most of us do not have a well-designed irrigation system. Florida has rules that are inconsistent across the state, and the quality of the systems going in the ground is often leaves a lot to be desired. So we're going to talk about what's involved in that. We're also going to talk a little bit about how to fix a poorly designed irrigation system, which I think might be beneficial for you. So some of this is probably too basic for many of you, but here is the traditional irrigation system at a home. Usually there's a water main that brings the water to your home, unless you have a well and you have your own source of water. It comes through a water main from the utility. It's measured usually at the entrance to the home using a meter, so they can bill you on how much you're using. You can't save what you can't measure, so that's a really important component. The irrigation controller, which is either in your garage or the side of your home, is kind of like the brains of the operation, telling the system when to run and when not to run, and for how long to run. We'll talk more about that also. In Florida, all systems are required to have what's called a backflow preventer. This prevents any of the water in the irrigation system backflowing into the home. So it protects the quality of water that you use inside the home. These are supposed to be inspected every year and oftentimes upgraded. I just moved from North Florida to Central Florida. The week I was moving, my backflow more or less exploded, and I had to get a new backflow because it had not actually been inspected in a long time. So just be aware the backflow is a very important part of your system to protect the quality of your water inside the home. The valves are the components that are usually in the ground in an irrigation box that are connected to the controller, and they're wired in, and they tell each zone when to run and for how long to run. So they're part of the brains of the operation. And you have the number of zones is equal to the number of valves that you'll have in that valve box. So if you don't know anything about your system, you can open that box, and if you see 4 knobs or valves, that means you probably have 4 zones, unless you have multiple boxes. Then the end of the system is the dispersal part, the sprinkler. We're going to talk a little bit about the different types of sprinklers, but this is essentially the guts of an irrigation system. These are the typical types of heads that you'll see. These are sprinkler heads. The most common one that many of you have in your yards is there on the left, a spray sprinkler head. It is a constant flow of water to a fixed area. It's not considered the most efficient type of head over time. When you look at the top of the spray head, you will see some numbers and etches. That tells you the spray pattern and also the distance of throw that spray head is supposed to throw to. These are all adjustable, but that screw in the middle is adjustable to reduce how far it flows. But this is important information to determine if your turf grass, for instance, is being irrigated efficiently. Some of you might have one of these called a rotor sprinkler. That's the one that goes back and forth. They're a lot more efficient, but it takes a lot longer to irrigate. And that's important to know. In a few minutes, I'll cover an aspect of the timing of rotor spray. And then kind of a hybrid, newer in the marketplace, is the rotary sprinkler. It's kind of like a combination of both. It's got a fixed spray, but it moves back and forth. It's considered to be more efficient, but it does apply water much more slowly. So let's look at the considerations. In your irrigation system, you should be familiar with the zones. It might be 4, it might be 6 or 7, depending on the size of your yard. So first, get familiar by turning on your system and maybe sketching out. Probably won't look like this. I know mine didn't when I first sketched out my irrigation zone. So you know when you turn on zone 1, what area of your yard is being watered. In a perfect situation, or not even perfect, we should be irrigating turf grass separate from landscape beds. Very, common reason is that we don't need to water our well-designed landscape beds as often as we do our turf grass. So turf grass should be irrigated separately. Pressure regulation, we'll talk a little bit about that. Even when everything else is perfect, if you've got poor pressure, you're going to have trouble with your system. Now let's drill down a little more on these irrigation zones. 2 considerations here. I mentioned one, landscape beds and turf grass should not be irrigated on the same zone. Rotor heads and spray head sprinklers should not be on the same zone. And I've got a graphic coming up to show you that. So those are the first 2 things to consider, especially if you're considering retrofitting your landscape system. Now I'll talk about ways you can do that to meet these requirements. So sprays and rotors in the same zone. What's the big deal? Many of us have these. Why is that a problem? Remember I mentioned that rotors irrigate more slowly. So say your goal is to put down 1/2 inch of water and you start irrigating. In 20 minutes, your spray zone has put down 1/2 inch of water. Its application rate is approximately 1.5 inches per hour. The rotor is still going. So you keep watering, and after 45 minutes, that rotor zone has put down the right amount of water, your 1/2 inch that you are looking for. But your spray area is totally overwatered an area. So you get very uneven coverage. And so that's really significant. So if you do nothing else, making sure sprays and rotors, either convert them all to sprays or convert them all, as I did in my home, I converted all of my heads to rotary nozzles. So they were all putting out the same amount of water at the same length of time. Next is the location of your sprinklers. For turf grass in particular, the ideal approach is that you have what's called head-to-head spacing. The water from one sprinkler head should be throwing all the way to the next. So if these are 10-foot sprays, they should be located 10 feet from the next sprinkler head. What we commonly see in poorly designed systems is this top picture, where the water only comes part way across. What happens with that is the parts of this turf grass area will become under irrigated. The homeowner will irrigate the whole zone faster, and that's when you see dry areas and other areas filled with dollarweed. One area is getting too much, one isn't getting enough. So that's why head spacing is one of the essential components of an efficient system. That can be a little more work. You can buy little extender pipes and you can move heads so that they perform better, or put in new sprinkler heads that touch so the water does flow from one side to the other. So let's take a look at the amount of water we're talking about when heads are not spaced correctly. So this is the top picture is evenly spaced. So it's important to understand that no irrigation system puts out water at 100% efficiency. Some of it evaporates, bits of it might run off. So 70% or 0.7 efficiency is very high. So in a well-designed system, putting out water evenly, you want 1 inch. It takes about 1.4 inches of water to put out 1 inch evenly to the root zone. That's where you want it. The second drawing here below shows a poor spacing on a turf zone. So the efficiency level percentage is 35% or 0.35. And in this case, to water that one dry area, they're paying at 2.8 inches. So think about that every time you run your system, every week of the year, if you water every week, that really adds up. So this is partly why we see these high water use numbers in homes that have automatic systems. But it doesn't have to be that way. Systems can be designed to be installed efficiently and operated efficiently. But this is the reason we see some of the problems. So I mentioned pressure earlier. Water is delivered to your home with a certain pressure based on what the utility puts out. Sometimes it's high pressure, sometimes it's lower, but these sprinklers and emitters function best within a certain range of pressure based on their construction. So sprays need a lower pressure, rotors need a higher pressure to operate the head. When the pressures supplied through the valve are not in this manufacturer's recommendation, sprinklers and emitters won't perform properly. So this is really a significant component to high water use or even poor aesthetics of the landscape. But there is a solution. So there's a couple of things you can do. There's such a thing as a pressure regulation valve. So that is this picture here, the lower right-hand side. That within the valve box, you can put a pressure regulator, which brings the pressure down to the right. And usually it's a high pressure issue. It brings it down to the right amount of pressure for that zone. You can also buy, and this rotary nozzle is an example of one, pressure regulated sprinkler heads. They do cost more. They're more in the $10 range, but they also bring down the pressure to the right amount for the operation of that sprinkler head. So that way, if you address your pressure issues at the zone valve or at the head, you're not seeing this atomization of water and loss to the atmosphere. None of us like paying our bills, but I certainly don't want to pay it so water can evaporate into the atmosphere. And it can be in significant quantities. So a few other considerations to think of with your irrigation system is the heads need to rise above the turf grass. I think we've all seen, if we've an older home and we have St. Augustine in particular, it accumulates thatch year after year. So it's a lot of times in an irrigation system that's poorly designed, you might only have a 4-inch head. St. Augustine needs a 6-inch sprinkler head, so it can rise above the turf grass. So that's, you know, for instance, what in Florida Water Store, you have to have head to head spacing. You can't have zones that have rotors and sprays in the same zone, and all heads must be 6 inches for St. Augustine or even zoysia. Heads should be directed so they're only irrigating the turf grass or the bed, not the sidewalk, not a mulched area. So that's really important too, especially with reclaimed water. You don't want people riding their bike or walking through reclaimed water. There is always the potential for illness or I'm trying to think of the correct term, but that water isn't always the cleanest, so you don't want it going in your mouth or your ears or whatever. But even so, it's just a waste of water. Next thing to consider is, this gets very technical. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but let me know if you want to know more. We've got an excellent page on the Water Store website that explains it. But when you buy a rotor nozzle, they come with this one type of nozzle in the rotor head. It's the area where the water comes out of. It's a certain size. When you buy rotors, they all come with the same nozzle. But you might be irrigating a full circle, a half circle, or a quarter. You are supposed to put a different size nozzle depending on the area you're irrigating. Otherwise, you get uneven coverage. Too much in one area, too little in another. These nozzles come on a plastic nozzle tree. They're pennies, but most irrigation installers don't take the time to change out the nozzle to make sure that there is adequate water coming through for the area you're irrigating. So that's a really cheap fix. And let me know if you need to know more about that. It can be complicated to understand. Oh, one more slide. If you have micro irrigation or these micro sprays in your beds, they need to be well taken care of to prevent blockages, or consider adding micro irrigation to your beds instead of the high volume sprays and sprinklers. So those are kind of the key design criteria. I found this study really interesting. Several years ago, the University of Florida decided to take a look at, in a large study of over 3,000 homes, what are the most common issues? If we're going to tackle this problem of irrigation and efficiency, what are the problems that we see? So there were 5 that represented half of all recorded problems. Irrigating turf and landscape beds in the same zone. We talked about that. Mixed sprinkler emitter size and unmatched application rates in the same zone. That's sprays and rotors have different application rates. They should not be in the same zone. The stream of water blocked by vegetation. So that row of sprinkler heads up against your house, that's much better to be drip tubing or not high volume sprays because it's blocked. Operating time is too frequent, and the operating time is too long. So you're watering for too many minutes too frequently. 4 and 5, I think, are probably the most common problems I hear about from utility conservation programmers. If they do nothing else but help the homeowner reset the timer on their controller, they can save a lot of water. And that's documented in their programs. So moving on to irrigation scheduling then, that is when you water, what time of day, for how long, how many minutes, and how much water. So there's this common misperception when I do homeowner presentations around my district. There's always, every single time, there's going to be one person who'll say, you know, it's the St. Augustine. That's why we're all using too much water. And I like to say, I have yet to see a piece of St. Augustine crawl into a garage and turn on an irrigation controller. I know some of you are tired of hearing me say that, but it's the humans involved in setting the controller. St. Augustine can be perfectly drought tolerant if it's irrigated appropriately. It does not need to be watered as much as it frequently is. They can all be trained to have deeper roots and to sustain and look very attractive with less water. So all the districts except for the Northwest District have mandatory year-round irrigation restrictions. These are the St. John's District. You should look up your water management district to see what your rules are. Almost all of us have 2 days per week during daylight savings. And St. John's District knocks it back to 1 day a week during Eastern Standard Time because it is cooler in North Florida. So grass can do quite well on 1 day per week. All of this was based on studies and research from UF on the appropriate amount of water that goes on the ground. There are exemptions. I mentioned the reclaimed water exemption. That's a disposal issue. Utilities need to be able to dispose of it. So it is exempt from the restrictions. Also, new plantings. In our district, you can water every day for the first month, every other day for the second month. That's more than generous for most new plantings in your yard. Currently, micro irrigation is exempt. I'm hoping that that might change when we open up this rule in a few years. There's no set plan right now to change it, but micro irrigation is such a common practice at this stage. It doesn't need to be exempt from the restrictions. It should be limited water use. And then chemical applications. The 10 minutes that you need to water in chemicals are also exempt. The other thing that I think I forgot to mention on this slide, it is based on your address, odd and even days. So if your house is an odd number, it's Wednesday and Saturday. An even numbered house is Thursday and Sunday. No more than 1 hour per zone. That's more than enough, even in the driest time of the year. And either 1 hour per zone or 3/4 of an inch. That's hard to figure out, but I'm going to show you a method if you're really interested. So to help you figure out how long you should run, we know your days. So I'm odd numbered, so mine is going to go tomorrow and Sunday. I'll be honest, with the hurricane, I just turned the system off. It's perfectly fine to turn off your irrigation system if you're getting a lot of rainfall. It should automatically turn off, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Here is an approximate length of time, depending on the head type. So if you've got sprays, in the summer, 25 minutes, 15 in the fall. Winter, you really don't need to be watering much. And then in spring, back up to 20 minutes. Maybe by March, April, you need to go to 25. Rotors and rotary nozzles are similar in their needs. 45 minutes, remember they water more slowly. 30 minutes in fall, less than 10 in winter, and then you ramp up again once it gets hot in the springtime. That's an approximate. But I thought, just in case folks wanted to know where these numbers came from and why you see these a lot, there's a method to this, there's a formula. So I'm going to show you how the irrigation industry is supposed to quantify the runtime for your controller. And I say supposed to because I don't know that many people actually do this. Maybe if you have work done in your system, ask if they did use a formula to calculate your runtime. So we're trying to understand what the application rate is, or the precipitation rate, how fast water goes down. So that's the average rate of precipitation occurring for an irrigation system over a certain irrigation surface. It's measured in inches per hour, and there's a formula. You thought you'd gotten out of doing this since you were in college, right, or high school. But to correctly calculate how much water you should run your system, there's a formula. So we're calculating the precipitation rate, alternately application rate, same thing. There's a constant number, 96.3, that converts gallons per minute to inches per hour. It's there in every formula. The total gallons per minute. This is the cumulative flow from all of the sprinklers in the zone. So you calculate it zone by zone. So say you have 10 sprinklers, you have to look up for that type of sprinkler on their website, how much water is put down per hour, in either in gallons per minute or per hour, depending on, they're called sprinkler charts. So it is possible. Most irrigation professionals just know these numbers because they deal with them all the time. Then you need, on the bottom of this formula, the total area you're irrigating. So you're calculating the amount of water going out divided by the total area to get the precipitation rate. So in this example, remember the constant of 96.3, the conversion factor. The total gallons per minute of the whole zone is 28 gallons per minute. And that's all of the heads. The area we're irrigating is 4,000 square feet. These are just sample numbers. That tells us that this system is capable of putting down 0.67 inches per hour. Then the next step is to figure out the amount of water, inches of water needed, divided by that precipitation rate. So this is to figure out weekly what you need. Say you want to put down an inch per week and your precipitation rate is 0.67 from the previous slide. The runtime then is 87 minutes per week. And remember, I said you can't have more than an hour per week. Well, luckily that's divided by 2 because you can water twice in a week. And that tells you you should run that zone 44 minutes, 45 minutes per cycle. So that is the methodology that's used by the industry to calculate run times. Personally, I prefer the chart. It's an approximation of what most systems need, but there is the other more detailed method if you're interested. Okay, I need to move on here, so there's time for questions at the end. By law in Florida, every automatic irrigation system is supposed to have an automatic shutoff device. That can be a rain sensor, They last about 2 years. So if your system is not shutting off in rainfall, you might need a new rain sensor. It can be a smart irrigation controller, whether it be weather-based or soil moisture sensor-based, different types. They are all rainfall shut-off devices. If you have one of these smart controllers, which are fabulous devices, they take the weather-based data for your region and tell your system when to turn on or off based on rainfall. You can program them for the irrigation restrictions so they can water twice a week unless it's raining. Here's an example of one I had at my home before I moved. It's called a Ratio controller. And this is the app on my phone telling me how much rainfall was either due or I had every day, and whether or not the system would run. So this is from a year ago, and it did not run because there had been rainfall. I thought I was really conservative about my water use until I got one of these controllers, and it saved even more water. Many of the local governments and utilities have rebate programs where you can get these at half price or for free. This one I got from JEA, my utility in Jacksonville, for free. I purchased it, sent in a form, and I got a check back from JEA. And they have now calculated for all of the smart controllers they have funded throughout their service area. They've quantified savings at least 30%. So it's definitely paid off. They've reduced their water use in that utility. So now you're all experts in what a good system should have, and you're thinking about your yard. You're like, yeah, mine doesn't do that. So let's talk about a few tips. So say your irrigation zones are irrigation beds and turf. And that's how mine were before we retrofitted it. There's a couple of options. You either change the landscape to match the irrigation system, which probably makes no sense because you don't want to go from perhaps a nicely designed bed to all turf, or you change the sprinkler heads. So what I did in my yard is I moved heads. Well, my husband did. I directed him. So that water was head-to-head spacing on the turf grass. We used these pressure regulated rotary nozzles. So the pressure was good, the spacing was good. And then when I got to the beds, we just capped them. We only left half the number of heads in the beds because we didn't need as much water as we had in the turf. So for instance, on an established bed in the corner by the house, we put these caps on the risers. So the beds were getting half the amount of and then we added more plants and moved a few plants around in the beds. So that's one solution. If you're looking at a large landscaped area, this is a community in North Florida. It was costing a fortune to irrigate this huge roadway of turf grass. So they started adding beds of native species and micro irrigation to reduce the amount of water needed. And it definitely was an effective program. So let's take a look at a summary of some of the benefits to an efficient irrigation system. Well, for you, the homeowner, you use less water, so you save money on your utility bill. And trust me, water is not going to get cheaper. It's going to get more expensive as we go to these more expensive alternative sources. You're actually helping to protect our natural systems from impairment when you water less. You're delaying the need for these more expensive, which we will all pay for, alternative sources when you conserve water at your home. All of us. I don't mean certain communities. If we all reduce that water use. And if you have reclaimed water and you're watering more efficiently, you're reducing the potential for harmful runoff into your ponds, rivers, or natural systems adjacent to where you live. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is actually from a hurricane a couple of years ago, but you can see here a flooded street and the irrigation system going. Last Thursday night, I had multiple irrigation people in the industry text me with photos. Apparently the Weather Channel had someone in Florida and they were interviewing him in a totally flooded area in the middle of the hurricane, and right behind him, the sprinklers were going. So this is a simple fix on what we need to reduce from happening. I hope you can see this. It's not super large, but in the St. John's district, there are 3 of us who do water conservation. I'm now focused in this CFWI region, Seminole, Orange, Osceola, and part of Lake. We have Gretchen up here in CSEC, and we have Craig McLean covering North Florida. So we have 3 different staff members who are available to help guide local governments, permittees, HOAs, and we're tackling water conservation by looking at water use at all the levels and how we can encourage efficiency. We also have a rebate program for local governments and HOAs who want to perhaps install smart controllers, change out sprinkler heads. If a utility wants to launch an audit program, they can come to us for funding. So that's open right now. So reach out if you are in St. John's District and you're with an HOA or a local government, come ask us for money to help you retrofit. And that is my last slide. And I think I cut it pretty tight.
You're good. You're good, Deirdre. We'll get some questions in. First, would you say that most of the water management districts around the state offer the same things or similar things that you offer, such as rebates? They work with the governments and HOA. Would you say that that's sort of a typical?
It is. SwiftMud has an even bigger, higher funded program, rebate program directly for homeowners for water conservation.
And SwiftMud is Southwest
Water Management District. It's called the WISE. If you Google Southwest Florida Water Management District WISE program, WISE, they have an awesome program for commercial, residential, HOA, and utilities, golf courses to come in and retrofit. So we kind of shaped our program on theirs because it's been really successful. All of the districts also have a much bigger, what we call our cost share program. Those are really big projects for a utility trying to address conservation with its entire service area. So we fund like Orange County, JEA, and all of the districts have that. That money comes from DEP for us. You need to be prepared to wait a little bit. You apply in January, you might not get the funding till October, and the project cannot start until the funding comes in. So that requires pre-planning. They all have irrigation restrictions other than the Northwest because they don't have the same pressures that we have, but all of the districts have irrigation too.
Okay. And I'm sure that people can find them by Googling their address and water management district.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I should try to send it. If I don't send it to you now, I'll give it to you. We actually have a little app on our website where you type in your address and it tells you what district you're in.
That would be great. If while we're talking, you could point us to the link. We'll put it in the chat.
Do that.
So I'll start with a couple questions. Can you adjust the sprinklers yourself, or do you need someone to do it? They said we have some spray sprinklers and that are uneven spraying our front yard, and now we're not sure how to adjust. But I have been told we need a specific tool.
Yeah, and I picked up a few of these tools, but I'm still a little nervous to do it because once I twisted too fast and it kind of exploded. But you can go to a irrigation supply shop like Ewing Irrigation, Site One, Florida Irrigation Supply. You've probably never noticed these stores, but they are throughout Florida and they sell to the industry and private people. And you can pick up, depending on whether you have Rainbirds or Hunter or Toro, these small little like a screwdriver. And they fit perfectly in that little screw on top and you can adjust it. Or sometimes you just twist the head. First try and just twist the head to narrow the angle, but to reduce the distance of throw, you're probably going to need that little screwdriver thing, which you can pick up at the supply shops.
Okay. Let's see. If winter is our dry season, why is the ideal time 0 minutes?
Because in North Florida, where most of my district is, it is our dry season. but grass goes dormant. A lot of times we have completely brown grass, and you can water that all day long and it's never going to green up. So the requirements of turf grass species in those winter months, December, January, February, is pretty much zero. The light amount of rainfall we get is adequate.
Yeah, so as much as you water, it's never going to turn green. It's just not, it's dormant. So
dormancy has become a real issue with all of the new residents who are watering like crazy because they think in Florida we should have green grass all year round.
Right.
The reality is in northern parts of the state, it goes dormant. Our natural systems go dormant, so does our turf grass.
Great, thank you. Let's see. How do we talk to people about their lack of maintenance of their systems? Many times it's financially prohibitive, especially regarding rain sensors, the general design of their systems, using smart controllers that also need to be potentially replaced regularly. How would you speak to people about that?
So a lot of our newer communities are in HOAs, and what's actually happening as water has become more constrained, those HOAs are coming to us for permits. Sorry, the developer comes to us for a permit, and the level of detail now in those new HOAs in the permit, it says that they must include in the covenants and restrictions for the HOA, they must include not maintaining your system, not altering your system, and keeping up with the amount of water recommended for your system. So we're addressing a lot of new communities with what we call legacy homes that are already out there. You can either talk to the HOA, you can reach out to almost every utility has a water conservation person now. You can call your utility and find out who does water conservation and tell them, we've got this homeowner who's maybe watering too often. And actually, that gives me a good idea. We also, the water management districts, we send out postcards to people who are watering at the wrong. It's not about maintenance of the system as much, but it's more about when they water. And I am just, can you see that?
Yes. Yeah.
Of our website. So watering restrictions. This is the water conservation page. Report over watering. So here's a little tip. Many of your local governments by law are not allowed to take anonymous complaints. It's a statute that changed several years ago, a rule that was introduced in Florida. That doesn't apply to us. So we have this page that allows you to, and I will put that in the chat also, report anonymous overuse of water. And we send out, initially we just send a postcard, but if it persists and we continue to get complaints, I usually, in my area, contact the conservation person and they will go out and talk to the homeowner.
Okay. It's not getting anybody in trouble, but it's just addressing the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Did you mention what is the best time of day to water?
Oh, I did not mention that. Thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome.
When the rule actually specifies no watering between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. That's the hottest part of the day when evaporation would be at its highest, or you might even scorch your grass on a really hot day. So watering should occur before 10 a.m. and after 4 p.m. Now, one of the complaints the utilities have on this restriction is everyone tends to water. If you imagine a neighborhood, all the odd numbered homes are watering at 4 or 5 a.m. on certain days, and the even number of homes are on the other days. So they like to the more they can spread out that water use. So some people watering in the evening and some in the morning, but definitely not between 10 and 4.
Okay. Let's see. Let me dismiss this. Okay. I am in an HOA and our irrigation system is a mess, being told to rewire. What are your thoughts on the wireless systems and so that they don't have to rewire their system?
It depends. So in my community, spent a lot of money installing one of those and never worked right, but they've improved dramatically since then. what I would do is reach out to several companies and have the reps for those companies come in and do a presentation. But from what I'm not an expert on every system that's out there, from what I hear is the wired in systems are better and more reliable,
Okay,
but they do cost more.
okay. Can you make this slideshow available to us?
I think so, yeah, as a
Okay.
PDF.
Sure, yeah, if you want to send that to me, I'll pass it along,
Okay,
if that's all right with you.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I know there was a lot of great information, and I know sometimes but you know, as presenters go too fast for people to write down.
It is a lot. We have a
yeah.
similar one for HOA CAMs, and
Okay.
they've come back several times because it's hard to absorb it all
Yeah.
in one visit.
And always know that anybody out there, you're, excuse me, more than welcome to watch this again. We'll post it, you know, within a few days. You can find it on our webinar link at floridafriendlylandscaping.com. Okay, shorter days means shorter run times. Think about photosynthesis driven by sunlight. That was just a comment.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and somebody said PDF is fine, thanks. So if there are any other questions, you know, please type them in now. Otherwise, let me dismiss all these. Otherwise, we will go ahead and end. I would just like to say, you know, with all of these storms and all of the, you know, all of these things that you all are dealing with around the state, you know, this is not a priority for a lot of you. And we still wanted to keep our schedule and our time. But also know that the IFAS, UF IFAS and your local county extensions are there as resources. So if you Google your county name and UF IFAS extension, you know, you'll find the webpage and there are all sorts of resources out there for you well beyond landscaping and conservation. So please, you know, reach out to them if you are looking for a resource that you can't find. Deirdre, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great presentation, and everybody else, please be safe, and we will see you next month. Don't forget to submit your questions if you have some, jwmarvin@ufl.edu for next month. So thank you very much. Deirdre, have a great day. Everybody have a great
Thank you,
day.
Jen.
Stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.